We've got Nick, who's been very patient, waiting to get on Coast to Coast AM, and we'll get to everybody in order. Nick, thanks for hanging on. Where are you going to take us on Open Lines?
I believe I'm half alien, half human hybrid, and as a result of that, I believe I don't know if you remember I don't know if you saw the Roswell documentary a couple of years ago or whatever they had on I think the Discovery Channel, but they showed how doctors and other people around the aliens that they dissected were exposed to some kind of extraterrestrial virus or some kind of just their biological chemistry, and as a result, they were hospitalized, and some of them were placed in a mental institution because they lost their minds as a result of being exposed to that virus. And what I think is going on with these cattle mutilations and everything, I think these extraterrestrials, along with the government, are trying to create half alien, half human bacteria and releasing it, or cows rather, releasing it into the population. Because really, I believe a lot of us are gonna be like these extraterrestrials. We're gonna appear like them in the future, not necessarily with big black eyes, small slit for a nose, and small slit for a mouth. But what I was exposed to in 1992, as a result of that, when I worked at a base that produced military components for a company in the States, anyway, I started to lose sleep deprivation, rapid weight loss, all these symptoms and then I started communicating telepathically with the TV and other people, and it was really bizarre. And
you were communicating You were communicating telepathically with the TV? What does that mean?
I'll explain that. What I mean is like an actor and actress would just before they were to say a line, I knew ahead of time what they were about to say on TV.
Could that just be because you're a bright guy and these TV shows are incredibly predictable? I mean, just maybe it might be that you have a higher than average intelligence and you could see that line coming a mile away.
Yeah, but you want to know something, Ian? As a result of this, I exposed some people to this virus because my doctor was telling me it's all in my head. And my brother, I didn't get along too well, I exposed him to it. And he also started to communicate telepathic with the TV, and I had rapid weight loss, sleep deprivation, everything else associated with it. And also somebody else from work as well had similar
How are you communicating this alien virus? How are they getting it?
I'd rather not say.
No, that's not fair. You can't hold out on us like that. What is it? How do you give them the alien virus? Don't we have to know this?
It'll scare a lot of people, but it's non-sexually, let's put it that way.
Well, okay, I'm glad it's non-sexual with your brother. Thank you. But I mean, what is it that you got to tell me? How do you communicate this? It's not going to scare people. We want to know, how do we protect ourselves against an alien virus? That's not fair that you hold this important health information and not pass it along.
It can be done like through saliva or blood and stuff like that, drop of blood or whatever.
So if you give a blood transfusion, if you donated blood, you would be donating this alien virus?
I'd probably be passing it on to somebody else, yeah. That's why I don't give blood anymore.
You don't give blood anymore because you don't want them to get that. And there's no screening for such a thing.
No, no, there isn't. No, unfortunately, no, there isn't.
Okay. Well,
the government's covering it up, big time. They're saying there's no such thing. It's all in your head, blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, I'm hearing more and more cases of people being exposed to this, and they're just not telling the full truth.
Wait. How did your brother get your saliva? That's what I want to know, though. How did that happen?
I'd rather, well, geez, it's a long story, but
I got a minute.
There's like a glass of orange juice sitting on the kitchen table, and just I timed when he came home from work, and I just placed a couple of drops in his orange juice just to see what would happen.
Wait. You intentionally infected your brother with the alien virus?
Yes, because he wanted me to die of AIDS.
You doped his orange juice?
Because he wanted me to die of AIDS. He was calling me some very bad names in 91, him and his brother, and as a control experiment, I exposed my younger brother and I left my older brother alone as a control experiment. But first, before I tested on my brother, I tested on my budgie, my pet budgie.
Okay.
And it came with hot chills, cold chills, fever, and it dropped dead 2 days later. So obviously I couldn't handle the potency of it.
So you infected your budgie with the alien virus?
Yeah, and it started shaking violently. After about 24 hours later, it started shaking, and then had a high fever, and and just dropped dead.
Okay. And then, so you kind of, let's just cut to the chase. You spit in your brother's orange juice.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I just wanted to see if this was transmissible, and sure enough, he came down with similar symptoms. About a month later, first of all, he came out with deep bronchial infection, like type of cold, and then all of a sudden, about a month and a half, 2 months later, two months later, he came to the room saying to my mom, I'm losing weight. And I said, serves you right. You shouldn't have told me to die of AIDS. And then he just walked away and said, I'm going to get even with you. And other stuff, like I'd be reading a book, Slaughterhouse-Five, and the character in the book says, you don't believe in God? Well, how about if I cut off your eyelids and force you to stare at the sun? Then you'll believe in God. And that very night, when I read that in the book, that very night, my brother had the same dream about that part in the book.
Okay.
So that's not so.
And do you ever feel bad about infecting your brother with an alien virus?
I do, very much so.
Okay.
It's awful. I ask God to forgive me every day about it.
And which people were living underground? Whose people?
These are 6 Mayan tribes that still exist today.
6 Mayan tribes still live in underground...
In the Yucatan Peninsula. Belize, if you want to get an orientation of the country.
Yeah. And they can trace themselves directly back to the breakdown of the Mayan Empire. They just went underground, and they've been living...
They're in hiding. Deliberately hiding. They don't want to be contaminated by outside philosophies. They don't want their people to be mixed with the economies of the world, and they believe that at the end of their civilization, that they will reveal this book of history that will be published for the world to know about the source of the universe and how it was created, and God and the whole 9 yards. And this was a magnificent text. I said, when you do this thing, let me help you translate it and let me help you publish it. And they assured me they would, but that it was not time. They had to get, first of all, the agreement of all the chief shaman rulers of the 6 tribes in unison to do that sort of thing, and all of them had agreed that we were right at the door, but not quite there yet, and that the year 2012 will play a part in that.
Okay. And so you've seen this book, or you only have heard of this book? I've
seen it.
What did it look like?
Well, it looked like Mayan writings to me. I'm very familiar with what Mayan writings look like. I don't read Mayan.
Is it like a codex? Was it written on parchment? Is it a scroll? I mean, what does it look like?
It's on metal sheets, and it's 800 pages long.
Okay, just 8 to 10 pages long, and it's written on metal.
800 pages.
Oh, 800 pages. Wow, that's a heavy book.
It is.
You'd have to, he be like lugging that around with a radio flyer wagon?
Oh, you need a cart.
Okay. So he showed you this book, which he brought up from where he came from, which was where?
He brought me photos of the book.
Photos of the book, okay.
Photos of the pages.
Okay. And tell me about this light source you said that they were using in these underground, these caverns where these Mayan people continue to live.
Well, I didn't get a chance to inspect it. All I know is that these same light sources are mentioned in the diaries of people like Pizarro and Magellan and Vasco da Gama. When they came to the Americas, there were whole cities that were lit with street lamps that were not fire sources of light. They were. It looked like somebody had lit up the street with normal street poles, street lights, but were not connected with an electrical source, and they were not using a wick and a fuel source. And in Egypt, they had the same thing in the down at the Ramesseum and in Luxor. They had the Ben stones, which I was not privy to see, but they're very much talked about. These are a light source of stone that glows in the dark, and they use them to navigate the underground passages. Well, I know one thing, that when Zahi Hawass allowed us to climb inside the pyramid, the Great Khufu Pyramid, I was specifically looking for carbon on the ceiling of that passageway into the King's Chamber, and there wasn't any. And I asked him, how in the world did they get light up? I mean, this was no small climb. It about killed me. I mean, climbing up to the top of the pyramids on your hands and knees, even though there's a kind of a staircase kind of a thing, was not an easy thing to do. It certainly is not something that you would do in the dark, you know. They talked about another form of light source that they used to light their way into the inner chamber and to utilize the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber and all the other little chambers that are inside the Khufu Pyramid.
And it would be difficult to say that it would be something that might be phosphorus, because wouldn't that require an exposure to light at some point in order for it to glow in the dark later on?
I think Michael Kramer would probably be the best one to ask that. I have a great deal of respect for his work.
Okay.
And Michael would probably be able to tell you more. All I know is that I found evidence of it.
Okay.
And vindicating what Michael Kramer had said about this particular issue.
All right. Well, let's
I don't understand it. I'm not a. I can't pretend to tell you what it is. All I know is that it's a light source.
Why would the Mayan people, in your estimation, based on the conversation you had with this mysterious messenger, why would the Mayan people agree to be photographed and to have anybody know that they even exist, just to avoid conversations like this where somebody might say, well, I'm going to Belize, next month on vacation, I'm going to go find them?
Oh, I can't tell you that. All I know is that they looked us up. We didn't look them up. And, obviously we were conversant in this particular subject, and so are they, and we had a chance to chat, I know one thing, that the emissaries from these 6 Mayan tribes have occasionally gone into the cities of Belize, and one of them in particular was a guy that was 9.5 feet tall. I mean, this was one great big boy, and when the CNN News got drift of this guy that was one great big guy, they sent a camera crew, and by the time they got there, this guy had disappeared into the jungle.
We had heard stories like this when we were talking with, I guess it would be Steve Quayle, talking about giants.
Oh, sure.
And,
Steve
right,
was all about this stuff.
Yeah, and Steve's been tracking this story of the giants of Belize, and that they live. But I thought he said that they lived in the jungle itself, in the thick rainforest jungle, not underground.
They do, and that's where the temples are located. We had a visit from a man who he calls himself the messenger. He lives with the 6 Mayan tribes that still live under the radar scope in the Yucatan Peninsula. These are tribes that have never been on CNN or ever been filmed in documentaries. They live primarily in the ruins that are only 5% of the ruins of the Yucatan Peninsula have ever been excavated. Or, for that matter, 5% of the ruins in South America have ever been excavated, and that's probably optimistic. There's probably more than that. But these
do they just tribes, can't find them? I mean, or they have them and no one's ever cataloged them? I mean, I'm surprised to hear anything hasn't been excavated.
They haven't even been cataloged. I remember when I was a young man taking the bus ride from La Paz, Bolivia, down over the Andes into the Yungas, into the jungles of the Amazon. And as we were taking that, it almost was like the trip of Tarzan off the escarpment, We were throwing with our waracas, which were the ancient Aymara slings, like David's sling that he slew Goliath with. Mm-hmm. We were throwing oranges off the edge of the cliff, and the orange would disappear before it hit the ground. That's how scary this ride was. But coming out of the side of these mountains were square stones the size of 2 buses side by side. And I can remember asking the bus driver, well, what is this square stone doing here? He says, oh, well, that's just one of the thousands of ruins that run around here all the time, and I'm going, holy cow, how many of them are there? And over my years living in South America, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of locations there. And I actually had a chance to live in Mexico, and in addition to Chichen Itza and Teotihuacan and all of those sites which are famous tourist traps, there are thousands more. And there are some tribal people that still live under the canopy the jungle canopy there, that are legitimate descendants of the Mayan culture, still speak the original Mayan languages. And guess who's one of the people who are some of the people who live with them? Giants, 9.5-foot tall boys. These are not thin little basketball players. These are muscular-built people, one of whom came into town here about a month and a half ago into one of the little pueblos in the Yucatan, scared the people half to death, and by the time the CNN cameras got down there, he had already gone back home, and they couldn't find him again. But they have come and visited us because they have Mayan codexes, Mayan texts. They had 800 pages of them translated into Spanish, and I speak Spanish. My wife is Mexican, and we're looking forward to someday telling the absolutely magnificent story of the ancestors of the Mayans. Of course, we know a lot of the tales already because of the Mayan codexes that exist in our day. We thought that the Indians never wrote anything. They most certainly did.
Well, I want to push it back a second. So this guy, the messenger who made contact with you, he represents these tribes, or is he a part of these?
He's not a part of the tribes. He went down there almost like Carlos Castanedas did into Oaxaca, into Mexico, and he befriended the tribe. But what he did, and the reason why he became the messenger, is he would take the writings that he had found from one tribal elder to the other one. There are 6 shaman there that are over 100 years old, that he walks continuously amongst these shaman, bringing them the writings, petroglyphs, artifacts from each of the other tribes so that they communicate with each other. And that way he's not the messenger to white Anglo-Saxons. He's the messenger within the tribal councils themselves. He's the bearer of the artifact and of the manuscripts amongst the tribes. And he comes up here twice a year, and we'll probably, we're hoping to have him lecture in our new town in Mexico. And also we'd like to have the shaman bring their artifacts and place them securely within the control of the Mexican government in the museums in Mexico. It's illegal to own Mexican artifacts in this country, and I highly am supportive of that. Because how many of us have gone to Mexico, including myself when I was young, and talked to the shaman. Camarino, who was the museum curator at Monte Alban, used to take me back to the shaman on several occasions, and I saw some of the artifacts at that time, and they gave me some of them. They gave me a stone statue, which was about 1.5 feet high. It was a skeleton with a hollow head, made out of stone, which was the symbol of death on the altar of Monte Alban in 1536. And along with that, he had a jade Madonna. This jade Madonna was over 1 foot high. Just the jade alone must have been worth a small freaking fortune. I told him not to give that to me, that I felt like that was a treasure beyond belief. I brought the symbol of death, or the skeleton, back with me. And when they passed the law that you could not have Mexican artifacts, I donated it to a museum. I have no artifacts, and I will have no artifacts.
And I want to ask you about the other artifacts from the Little Egypt area in a moment, but I still got to get back to this Mayan tribe thing, because I find this so fascinating. And so this messenger fellow, could he lead you back to these Mayan tribes living underneath the canopy and to these 9.5 foot tall giants?
He wants to get permission from the elders. That's why he went back, to get us an invite.
Because, I mean, that would be some serious news for you to take, even just like a camcorder in there and get something. You don't even have to have a big film crew on this at all.
No, you don't. You have to have some people who are not afraid. This is not like taking a trip into the wilds of Kansas,
Right. I mean, what would you fear would happen? I mean, would these Mayan peoples be warrior types? Do you think they would do something to you, being an outsider?
Hey, listen, man. I followed Carlos Castanedas into Oaxaca. You know who Carlos Castanedas is?
Yeah, sure.
I followed him into Oaxaca. That scared the living tar out of me right there.
I bet.
I met the brujas, the witches, the shaman ladies. Nobody wants to do that in their life that's in their right mind. I mean, when you're young and brave and you think you want to see God and you want to see spirits and you want to see the spirits walk out of the hills and you sit at their campfires and you think, if I only could see that once in my life. Trust me, think twice before you do that.
Well, but if you get the word out about 9.5-foot tall boys under the canopy, don't worry, you don't have to go in there. Just follow behind the NBA and college scouts. Just walk behind them.
We want a commission from the agent? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, let them walk point for you. And then you just follow behind them, and then we'll see what happens.
You are a commercial giant. You know that, don't you?
Yeah. Let's get to Fernando on the wild card line. And you probably get this all the time, don't you, Fernando? You look marvelous. You probably hear that.
Oh boy.
I'm
Ian,
sorry.
Thank you. No, it's quite all right. Ian, thank you very much for taking my call. I know it's very late this evening. On my way home from work, I heard a caller from El Paso who witnessed the large bird at the Franklin Mountains.
Right.
I was born and raised in El Paso, and my twin brother and I used to hike up the Franklin Mountains, which incidentally is the southernmost tip of the Rocky Mountains. The Franklin Mountains belong to the Rocky Mountain Range. Anyway, on the other side of the Franklin Mountains is another town, and my twin brother and I had relatives who lived there, and we used to visit them quite often and sometimes hike up the Franklin Mountains. Anyway, one afternoon as my twin brother and I were hiking, he taps me on the shoulder and says, look at this. And I turned around, and what we saw was the biggest bird. By the way, this is 1976. My twin brother and I were 16 years old, and we saw this humongous bird, feathered. It wasn't prehistoric looking. It was feathered, had a red neck. The feathers were black brownish, sort of. It was the hugest bird my twin brother and I had ever seen, and it had a dog that was struggling to get loose.
Yeah.
The talons on this bird were humongous. This bird, we saw it flapping. We could hear the flapping wings. We could hear this bird trying to pick up this dog and get away to take it. The wingspan, it was kind of far, probably about 20 to 30, well, to us it was far, 20 to 30 yards, but we could actually hear the flapping of the wings.
Oh, yeah.
They were probably about, I'm thinking 10 to 12 feet long, and as it was trying to take this dog, it was picking at it. It was poking at it. And my twin brother says, look, and we look at this thing, and I'll never forget it. I have kids today, and I have never said this to them, and my twin brother has never reported this story to our kids because we feared that they would not believe us.
Sure. First of all, let me ask you, your twin brother, Fernando, is that Bernardo, or what is your twin brother's name?
His name is Carlos.
Oh, Carlos. Oh, see.
Yeah.
And then you would put this in the Thunderbird category. What did you do? Again, you see this amazing thing. Did you try to save the dog? Did you call police? What did you do?
Well, actually, Ian, that's a very good question. We were 16 years old, unsophisticated, immature. We were scared to death. This bird was so big that we were actually afraid for our life. He kept telling me, look, and my thinking was, if it drops that bird, we think this bird could see us.
Right,
and
drop this dog.
If it lets go of this bird, it's coming after us.
Of that dog. Right.
You know, we're two fat Mexican kids, and we're thinking, you know, it's going to come to us. And Ian, it wasn't that far from us. I mean, it was very, very close. We're talking less than 30 yards, and
right.
We were so scared that I remember, I recall thinking, wanting to vomit. That's how scared I was.
Yikes.
And my brother and I kept thinking, this is not possible. I mean, how can a bird of this size exist today? And let me just say this to you, that at the time that we were seeing this, my twin brother and I were, this is kind of funny, but we were also students of a seminary studying to be Catholic priests.
Right.
This seminary was a high school seminary.
Sure, there's a bunch of them. Right.
Yeah, there was about 40 of us, and it's before the collegiate level, which is the theological level. But
sure.
I just wanted to tell you that because we were on a field trip from the seminary, and my twin brother and I took a separate route, and that's when we saw what we saw. When we got back to the bus, we were asking the bunch of our friends, did you see... We didn't say to them what we saw. We asked them if they saw anything unusual. They said no. But to this day, this is the very, very first time I've ever repeated the story because I fear that people would think that we were nuts. But the size of this bird, I remember the neck. I remember the thickness of the neck.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because, you know, your story complements so many others, and especially when you were describing the feathers, I find that very interesting because I was actually on an island earlier this week in upstate Wisconsin, and there's a lot of islands in the middle of lakes, and there was a lodge there, and I was staying on this island, and it was wonderful, and we had a great relaxing time, but it happened to be densely populated with bald eagles. And as I noticed at one time when I was sitting on the back porch of this lodge, one came swooping down over my head, and when it flew in front of the sun, I could see this brownish tint, almost a reddish tint to what I thought had been black feathers. So intriguing that you saw that too, and we'll just leave that there and say hi to Carlos for us and tell him that the story's been told. Cat's out of the bag in this case.
Well, I guess I'm kind of going along with the assassination plots. I was wondering if you've seen the picture that just came out a couple of days ago of Ronald Reagan visiting Russia, and there's a picture of him shaking hands with a little boy in Russia, and what appears to be Vladimir Putin standing off to the side with a camera looking like a tourist.
Right.
And I was thinking, have you seen that picture?
I have seen that photograph. It may even have been on the Coast to Coast website, but it's what some people are claiming to be Putin pretending to be a tourist so that he could ask President Reagan difficult questions, which is what the tradition had been, to send people undercover from the Soviet Secret Service agencies to kind of trip up foreign dignitaries or to try to skew their visit toward an agenda. Yeah. What do you think? It's Putin?
I do. I think it's Vladimir Putin. But what strikes me more is if a member of the KGB can get that close to a United States president, then that almost makes anything possible. If you think that a member of the KGB, gets that close to our president, he could have assassinated our president right then. If that would have been their goal.
Right. True. I think there are some really interesting questions on whether or not that really is Putin. There are some people that say he was stationed in East Germany, nowhere near the place where that photograph was taken, and that it doesn't even look like how he looked at that time. I don't know that. It was just something that somebody said, that he was clearly a mid-level military attaché at that point when Reagan visited, that his rise to power didn't come until later. Why would they fly him over? Why would they make such a special effort to get him next to Reagan when there are other people that could have done that? That having been said, maybe that's true. I hadn't thought about that a KGB agent could get that close. I didn't think Putin was KGB yet. I thought he was military, but if he's KGB and military too, I don't know enough about how those things work. I don't know. Do we not think that there are CIA plants that are close to foreign dignitaries when they come to this country?
Definitely. I would assume there would be.
Yeah.
I read a book by Tom Clancy, The Cardinal in the Kremlin, and he has a lot of inside information, and a lot of that is talking about where how we infiltrate the Russian government, and how we infiltrate the embassies that they have over here in the United States.
Sure.
But with Vladimir Putin, like you said, he was kind of low on the radar. He wasn't really a high-ranking member of the military or the KGB. Maybe that's one reason that he was able to get that close to Ronald Reagan.
Yeah,
because
maybe.
he wasn't on the radar. Nobody really knew who he was at that time.
If that's him, that's a fair point.
And a question I always had about Manson was that Robert Kennedy had dinner at Sharon Tate's house the night before he was murdered, and they killed everybody that was at the dinner except for Mr. Polanski, who had taken a plane to Europe a few hours, about 12 hours earlier than expected. And I always wondered if that's why they were all killed.
I hadn't heard that Robert Kennedy ate there the night before he was killed.
Yep, and that never came up anywhere. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I've just never heard that before. I knew about the other star connections. I knew about Doris Day's kid and the Beach Boy connection, but I never knew that there was an RFK connection. Interesting. So, what would be how would you tie those together? How would those threads intertwine?
Because Manson was involved, perhaps with MK Ultra, using MK Ultra techniques with his people, with the hypnotism and mind control, and so that maybe that he was asked. Because I heard that the LA police was told not to track Manson, and then when they heard that Sharon Tate's father had left with some Navy SEALs to go find Manson, then they said, "You better find Manson before Mr. Tate finds him and makes him talk."
Interesting. All right, well, very good. I'll have to look into that Robert Kennedy connection. That's probably one of those facts that has existed for years, and I just never know it, which gives me great hope that there's still very interesting things to learn tomorrow. You knew Manson in prison, that you were a prison nurse. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. In what capacity were you Charles Manson's nurse?
I worked at I won't say the name of the medical facility of Department of Corrections. And I took care of Manson on and off for 17 years. Well, I'm retired now, but he's definitely not remorseful. And from what the caller said, reading his eyes, boy, is he's really off with those eyes. He's not remorseful, and he is very proud of what he did. And he said there's a heck of a lot more bodies where nobody's found. So
I've always heard that, and Vincent Bugliosi and others have said that there are just too many disappearances around Manson, especially where they lived out on that movie ranch, that there was no way that they'll ever know all the people that may be buried out there. So you would take care of him for scrapes
different various reasons, and he's very institutionalized. He loves being in prison.
Does he really?
Has. Oh, yes. And
when you say that,
I'm sorry.
What do you mean by that? I'm just curious. I mean, tell me what.
He actually always have felt it was his home and his first home, and he didn't really like being on the outside. He used to sit and chat with us, and he actually was. He's just a short little thing, and he's actually used to, when you could smoke in the prison system, he'd try to bum cigarettes from the staff, and he'd be very respectful, and to the staff. He would never. He used to act up now and then, but not when I was around.
So whenever you saw him and he was on his best behavior, did he ever, if I can ask, come into the ward there where you worked as a result of prison fights or anything that he might have?
Not Manson, no.
Not Manson.
No, he had a whole bunch of people that followed him, and the disturbing part about Manson is the fact that wherever he is, no matter what institution he's been transferred to over the years that I was there, that he has a young following of young inmates. and he would sit on the lawn, and he'd have like a group of 20 or 30 or more inmates around him, listening to his every word. And that's the disturbing part about Manson and his influence, because he reaches out and he still has an influence on the young inmates that come in, and that's the hard part. And he used to, whenever these young inmates would get transferred to other prisons, if any of the other Manson group, like I actually worked with Tex Watson and worked with him. I took care of Tex Watson and Bobby Bousselet, which is two. They're both in prison,
right?
And the followers would come through, and they would actually give messages to Tex and Bobby that Manson was watching him through these guys, and that they better keep their mouth shut, or else he'd kill them. And
he would have other people.
It would never be him doing the deed. It would always be the young followers. And he has letters, and he gets money all the time. His whole life he's got thousands of dollars on the books because of people sending in money, and it's just incredible, his following. And I read one somewhere that people will send checks to somebody like a Charles Manson so that he'll endorse the back of the check, and that way then they have an autograph from Charles Manson that they can sell or treasure as they see fit. Probably so. There's a lot of groupies when it comes to the prison, but Manson is definitely somebody that is one of the stars when it comes to the population for people outside. And he's definitely a very evil man, and I have no doubt that he's mentally ill in a way, but he actually knew exactly what he was up to, what he was doing. He had there was nobody where he was mentally ill where he didn't know what he was doing. He definitely knew what he was doing.
Real quick question, and thank you again, Linda, for calling in, and that's an interesting reflection on a previous call. But who else might you have come across when you were working there at the prison as a nurse? Anybody else that?
Oh yeah. Well, of course,
any former governors?
Bernanke, what's his name? Who was the head of Death Row Records? What's his name? Suge Knight.
Oh yeah.
I took care of him, and lots of, and the two Hillside Stranglers guys.
Oh really?
Yeah. They were. I used to work in the ADSEG unit, which was the lockup unit, and go medicate these guys. And I'm half peace officer, half nurse, so I have I'm only 5'1", but I always walked on the yard pretty boldly, and I have a sixth sense, so I always used it in the prison system, and so I never had any problems.
At 5'1", did you see eye to eye with Manson, or could you actually?
Oh. Yes, actually, he was he was maybe just a couple inches taller, but
he was just a little taller.
Yeah,
okay.
He was a very small man, and he was wild. His hair was always wild and crazy, and sometimes he'd shave it, but he would actually sit and just chat with us and kind of talk. He'd ramble on about some of his past experiences, and he was very comfortable with staff.
Did he ever confess to anything?
As far as like Sharon and those guys,
Sharon Tate or anything else,
other than saying that he would laugh all the time and always say the same thing, that God, they don't know how many bodies are really buried out there. And we'd say, "What are you talking about, Charlie? Are you talking about there's more bodies out there?" He said, "Oh, you don't know the half of it." He said, "You wouldn't believe where all those bodies are." And then we'd say, "Are you kidding?" And he'd say, "Oh no." And then he'd laugh like a crazy man, and then you kind of walk away at first thinking he was actually a little, and then you'd realize that he probably wasn't. He was probably telling you the truth.
Linda, I so much appreciate your time, and thank you for calling in, and that's very interesting.
And I think you're a wonderful host, and I enjoy your weekend program. So,
well, thank you very much.
I also had an attorney, and his name was Irving Kanarick, who happened to be Charlie Manson's attorney. And I had to spend one day in court after Charlie went to jail. And it took 8 hours for me to be heard. I pleaded the Fifth Amendment and walked out of the courtroom. It was just over a hitchhiking thing. And he explained the whole layout for me. If you would have known the way Sharon Tate and her baby were strewn over the rafters.
Right.
You know, what happened was Roman Polanski, when he would leave town, Sharon Tate would have cocaine parties, and he was starting to get wise to what was going on. Well, she used to buy her coke from devil worship type people. This was a signal to people who bought coke from them that if you do anything to us to turn us in, this is what's going to happen to you. And Vincent Bugliosi never became Attorney General, and he ran for Attorney General. I was there in California because he got an illegal report from.
Okay. Music's rolling here, so we're running out of time. Let me ask you. So, are you saying that Charles Manson's family did not kill Sharon Tate? That it was a devil-worshipping cocaine cult?
It was not Charlie Manson himself. Everybody else would do.
No. We know that. Wait. We know it's not Manson himself, but it was not his. It wasn't the Manson family that did it.
The rest of them were capable of anything, but no, I don't think they did it according to his attorneys.
Okay. All right. Well, let's leave that there. Manson, the people in jail for the Tate LaBianca murders, innocent according to Richard.
Yeah, I had a couple of things I wanted to say real quick. Number one was about the JFK assassination. Everybody's still trying to figure out just what happened there. Well, what top intelligence said about it by one of Kennedy's own men is that it was a CIA hit, and there was a remote-controlled bomb planted in the back of the seat in front of which he was sitting, which was exploded by remote control, which actually killed him. That's all I know about that. The main thing I wanted to say tonight was, regardless of whether we went to the moon or not, do you personally believe we went to the moon, Ian?
Yes.
Well, I do, too. Top intelligence from the same source says that the first war in space took place in September of 1977. What happened was the Rockefellers were building a secret laser beam base in Copernicus crater on the moon, and they were going to use the Russians to take over the world for them in a nuclear exchange between the U.S. and Russia. And the Russians found out about the plan to double-cross them with the laser beam on the moon, and they knocked the secret American base out with a neutron particle beam from a orbiting satellite, which was manned back in September 27, 1977. And ever since then, they've had complete control of space.
How about that? Well, that's good to know. Maybe that's what that most recent explosion to try to find water was really about. Either way, it's a miracle we've made it long enough to even think about getting blown out of the sky in 2012. Open lines. Where are you going to take us? Coming up on Coast to Coast AM, this is Ian Punnett.